Frugality isn't just about shopping less, but realizing that shopping isn't actually what's fun or making you happy. It's a temporary dopamine hit that so many other things can provide. The things that make us truly happy cannot be bought. We use frugality to get more of those things. To an extent, the chips are stacked against us, and there are very real barriers to affording the things we need and want. Anyone saying anything different is gaslighting. But just because the playing field isn't level doesn't mean we can opt out of the game. Being frugal for frugal's sake is a lifestyle that very few people enjoy. But when you're doing it to get more of what you really love in a way that works for you, then you'll find the results are very fun.
We're often taught that we're either spenders or we're savers. And the reality is we all spend and we all should be saving, but we're not often taught the skill of spending. We are told to only spend on basic necessities. Don't spend beyond that. If you do spend, it's not wise, and save as much as you possibly can. And we say spending's necessary. We can spend. We've got a lot of needs to spend on that aren't just basic needs, right? Because food, clothing, shelter, yeah, but what if I want my clothing to look good? What if I want my shelter to be aesthetically pleasing? What if I want my food to be tasty? And so we can kind of see how there's this murky line even between needs and wants.
We coined this term the 4 Fs because we're the frugal friends and we love F words. Family, friends, faith, and fulfilling work. These are the 4 things that I think 80% of the time we're trying to get at, and they meet pretty much every single one of those higher needs: connection, esteem, and self-actualization. You can get at all 3 of them in all 4 of these core values. So if you're feeling kind of confused on where to start figuring out, okay, how do I align my spending with my values? If you just run it through the filter of the 4 Fs, it's a really good place to start to figure out why you're making the purchases you are making.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
All right, guys. Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. We're recording this in Christmas month, a week before Christmas. This will come out in February, so we'll have a Christmas episode for you, and this will be probably a Valentine's Day episode. Jackie, how are you doing today?
I am doing awesome, Bill. I'm ready for the holidays. I know this won't come out, like you said, until February. However, it is December when we're recording this, and things get a lot lighter, a lot funner, time with friends and family. So you're one of those friends, and we got the frugal friends with us too.
Yes, exactly. We got Jen and Jill, but before we get going there, we got to give a couple of shout outs too. The shout out today for our charity of the week is Bloom for Women. And I'm going to ask Jill to tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. They're located in Northeast Pennsylvania, and they have 5 homes for women exiting sex trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation. They provide a program and housing for women looking to find a better lifestyle and recovery from trauma.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's bloomforwomen.org. Link will be in the show notes. We want you, as part of your giving plan, which is an important part of your financial plan, think about helping out bloomforwomen.org. The shout out for our podcast of the week is Adam Grant's Work Life. I love Adam Grant and all the books that he writes. It's not a finance podcast, but it's about how to organize your life. He's an organizational psychologist, and I love his work. Read his books, listen to his show. You will definitely take away something from that. Lastly, before we get started, we have our review of the week, and it comes from KJS 1016. My people, a 5-star review. I have finally found my people. This podcast is amazing. Been listening to it for a year now. The information and encouragement is amazing for people like me who are a late starter to the 5 movement. Thanks so much, Bill, Jackie, and Becky, for all that you've done and continue to do for this community. I can't wait to meet you one day. Well, we hope to meet you too, KJS 1016. We're going to Economy, and I hope that you're going to be there. All right. Now, Jackie, we got to introduce, they probably probably don't need an introduction. It's at least polite to make a little bit of an introduction for these two because they're known as the Frugal friends. One is Jen and one is Jill. Why don't we go ahead and introduce Jen first? She and her husband paid off $78,000 of debt in 2 years and bought a house on a combined income of less than $90,000. There's some inspiration for our audience. Jen didn't want to change her spending to pay off debt and opted for side hustles instead. We got to hear what those were, actually. She quickly took on so many that she contracted shingles due to stress. One of Jen's side hustles was designing t-shirts and selling them on Amazon. She was featured in Money Magazine for it. Shingles led her to try a no-spend challenge to control her spending. And we want to hear about what that is. The experience was so life-changing, she wrote a book about it, and it has over 2,000 reviews on Amazon. She feels personally victimized by budgets, doesn't make one, although I think Jill does, and tells others they don't have to either. Okay, we got some differences here in the friends. They're not the same. They're not twins. But Jackie, who's Jill?
Yeah, well, Jill is not far behind because her and her husband paid off $60,000 over a 7-year period while cash flowing her master's degree. As a licensed clinical social worker, she's experienced in doing a lot with a little. From starting a small business to full-time RVing, all of it was leveraged in her debt payoff journey. She's helping others in her highest value and integrating her mental health perspective with personal finance. And that's how she supports others to identify and live out what they value the most. When she's not meeting with clients or podcasting, you can find her in the garden of hosting friends in her St. Petersburg, Florida home. So that is Jill. Jen and Jill, welcome to Catching Up to Fi.
Oh, wow. Thank you for having us.
What a lovely introduction.
I know.
Well deserved.
Actually, you wrote it, and we just utilized your great
You
prose.
took the most interesting part of our bios and made us sound very cool.
Well, you're interesting. I met Jen at a FinCon, and unfortunately, Jill couldn't be there. But Jen gave us a copy of her book. She signed it. I'm a big fanboy. And FinCon was just so much fun. And meeting some of the friends and the idols and the heroes and being a part of the community was really fun for me, too.
Yeah, I love FinCon. I just recently posted on Instagram just like a thankful, like gratefulness post because I was just feeling overwhelmed in this like marketing time for the book. Just how grateful I am to know so many like great people and friends and mentors from specifically FinCon.
And Jen, you spoke at FinCon, you did a main stage talk, and you switched it up at the last minute because you were impacted by the storm.
Yeah, I felt like I talked on the same thing. So I didn't change the title of the talk, but it was really changing the idea of burnout to be from just like this really work centric to burnout when it's like your life. You're burnt out in life and like figuring out how to do work in the midst of that. And it was really good. It was really cathartic for me, actually.
And what you reminded us of is that it takes a village. You can have extreme devastation and people come together at times of stress and travail. And it's amazing how you can't live life in isolation. That's what Frugal Friends is actually probably all about. And we talk about catching up to FI together. And the community aspect of what we do is so important to us.
I'm glad you spoke about that, Jen. So thank you for that. We kind of went off script a little bit there, but the storms devastated a lot of people. And it was kind of cool for you to bring a voice to it at FinCon because that's what was going on in your life. So,
all right, let's turn towards this new book. This is exciting. This is their first book. It's called Buy What You Love Without Going Broke. Now, I was really impacted by the introduction because there's a purpose to this book, and it came from one of their listeners, one of their fans and community members, Amber. And I'd like to actually read this into the show and have Jill, maybe you start first, read Amber's email, which will launch us into what we're talking about today.
Sure. So our podcast listener and friend Amber wrote this to us at one point. Hi, I'm just starting out and feel like I'm failing miserably at my frugal journey. Maybe my problem is that I have too much fun buying things. Not just things, but experiences too. Recently, you mentioned being frugal can be really fun, but I'd love to know how. I have student loan debt, no real savings, and I'm thinking more and more that just owning a home might be an unattainable goal. goal. I love my job as a teacher, but there are no prospects for any significant pay increases, so I need to be more frugal. But I also don't want to stop living my life just for the sake of saving. I'm sick of feeling like wanting to shop is a bad thing and that all my financial shortcomings are my fault. I don't think being better at budgeting or buying fewer lattes is the answer. Trust me, I've tried that. I want to enjoy my life, but I do fear I'm screwing myself over in the long run. Do you have any podcast episode about ways being frugal is fun or ways we can make it as fun as buying things is? I've learned so much from you and have put a lot of your advice in place, but I can't say I find being frugal fun, and I need it to be. Thanks, Amber.
Isn't that touching?
It is.
That is such a mission statement for what you do and what you do with this book. Now, the two of you wrote a response, and maybe we'll have Jen read that.
Yeah, and we preface it saying that it did take us a bit of time to figure out what to say, but here is what we finally responded with. Frugality isn't just about shopping less, but realizing that shopping isn't actually what's fun or making you happy. It's a temporary dopamine hit that so many other things can provide. The things that make us truly happy cannot be bought. We use frugality to get more of those things. To an extent, the chips are stacked against us, and there are very real barriers to affording the things we need and want. Anyone saying anything different is gaslighting. But just because the playing field isn't level doesn't mean we can opt out of the game. Being frugal for frugal's sake is a lifestyle that very few people enjoy. But when you're doing it to get more of what you really love in a way that works for you, then you'll find the results are very fun.
That's wonderful. I mean, and a great response too. Jackie, what do you think?
I love it. It warms my heart. And the fact that this email came from Amber, my daughter's name is Amber, and I can see her writing something almost exactly like that. So you guys are doing great work. You're touching a lot of lives.
And Amber is sort of an avatar for what you do, really. I mean, she is that audience member we're trying to talk to today and that you guys talk to. But let's circle back for a minute, because you didn't start out necessarily being frugal. Everybody has a journey. You have your debt journeys, you have your financial journeys, and it wasn't easy. And you talk about living in the extremes versus the radical middle. And both of you had some extremes that you were living in. Maybe, Jill, you can take us through what it was like to live through your extremes and take us through your financial journey, and maybe even some of the financial origin story that may have led you to some of the issues you struggle with later.
We see so much of ourselves in Amber's email. I think that's why it struck such a chord with us and why it was kind of the guiding light for us in the type of book that we want to write and who we're writing it for. Really, in many ways, it's our younger selves who had debt and seemingly not enough money to pay for it, but goals and things we wanted to achieve, but feeling like the cards are stacked against us. And for me, you could almost replace Amber's email saying, I'm a teacher with, I'm a social worker. I still am a social worker and still do work in the field, but right out of college, my social work career and job was paying me $24,000 a year. And while that was 15 years ago, it still wasn't a lot of money then. And so I felt really defeated seeing that this is the amount of money that I'm making annually, and yet my student loan debt is $30,000. So what I'm making is still not enough to cover it. And yet being very aware of the debt, wanting it gone, I felt the realities of owing money and feeling like it was limiting me and holding me back, but yet not wanting to sacrifice the job that I did find so fulfilling. I didn't want to have to find other work or go back to school to pursue a different kind of career. It felt really meaningful to me. And so this kind of caused me to question, are there ways that I can have both, where I can be aimed at debt freedom and have this kind of what seemed lofty financial goal while still working in a field that I love, albeit doesn't pay me much? And so this at the time led both my husband and I to choose to reduce expenses. If I wasn't finding ways to make more, what else can I do? And so that led us to living in an RV for 2 years. We didn't do it to have the Instagram moments of traveling the United States. We did it truly to be able to own a home within our means. And so that for many people is certainly an extreme. And we love to say that we don't want to set up camp in extremes. We think that they can be very informative and educational to us about what is good on either end of the spectrum, but that extremes are not sustainable. And that eventually we want to hold the tension between the beneficial aspects that exist in both extremes and find our own radical middle. And we call it radical because not many people go there. We are drawn to the extremes. We want either or. We struggle with the both and. But when we can find those things, when we give ourselves space to identify, what do I like about this end of the spectrum? What do I like about being able to pursue financial goals while also remaining tethered to certain financial constraints? What kind of creativity can be born in me? What might I be able to problem solve here? And so living in an RV was not a long-term solution, but a short-term one that did allow us to pay off debt, cash flow my master's degree, and eventually buy a home. So I now live in a 1,500 square foot home, still not massive, but much bigger than the 170 square feet that I lived in. And for me, this now is my radical middle as I also incorporate permission to earn more, permission to steward all of my resources well and understand how each of those kind of coming together help to create a lifestyle that feels really life-giving to me.
Well, that's an awesome story because actually what you did with your RVs and mobile homes is you flipped them. You sold one. So you were a hacker and a flipper all in the same time. And I hadn't heard about flipping mobile homes, but one of them was the down payment on your house and one of them paid off your master's degree or your student loan debt or something like that, right?
Absolutely. You are an expert on my past experiences. Yeah. The first one we flipped, sold that, and it was what allowed me to cash flow my master's degree. And the second flip was the down payment on our home.
And the interesting thing is here, and this will be a lead into Jen's story, is you actually camped out in Jen's backyard.
Sure did. Yeah. So we did do some road trips. While that wasn't the goal of having the RVs, that's how Jen and I ended up meeting, was our first road trip in our first RV when we were in St. Petersburg for a couple of days. We connected, became fast friends over this ability to talk about typically stigmatized, taboo topics of personal finance and debt payoff, and really finding such freedom and fun in these conversations and encouragement in one another that kind of then ended up leading to the podcast. But eventually in our second motorhome, we decided that we wanted to get out of a Philly winter and spend a little bit of time in the St. Petersburg sun. So we did that in February 2020, and we all know what happened next. So we ended up extending our stay by a couple of weeks because this was still when it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And we were like, well, we might as well do it where it's warm instead of where it's cold. And that eventually led us to want to buy a home in St. Petersburg and move from Philly to here. And it has only benefited both my and Jen's relationship, our friendship, as well as our business and our ability to help others and make personal finance, education, and entertainment accessible.
So now, did you guys already say how you met? How did you guys meet?
Well, it was kind of random, but kind of not. I met Jill's husband about 8 years prior at a party in San Diego where neither of us lived one time, and we became Facebook friends and never spoke again. And so then when they were in St. Pete, Eric had friends that were in the area. And so he posted on Facebook, hey, is anybody like down for hanging out? And I saw it, but it was not meant for me. But I saw nobody had responded. So I just invited them. We were already going out with friends one night, and I was like, hey, we're going to go watch the sunset on the beach at this bar. If you guys want to come, you are welcome. And Jill did not want to come, but Eric,
I was reluctant, but I'm so glad we did.
Extroversion persuaded her to come.
Isn't serendipity or 6 degrees of separation some of the best things that happen to us in our lives?
Mm-hmm.
I say that our story of meeting and becoming friends is even better than how I met my husband. It is a very fun story.
Yeah, it parallels the way I met my husband for sure. There was more alcohol involved with the romance story, but yeah, I'll let you decide which one's the romance story.
You've heard about a bromance, but this is a cis-man.
Yeah.
By another mother, right?
I got Jill last year for Christmas a book called Work Wife, only because I didn't read it. I just saw that the title was Work Wife, and so I got it for her.
Oh, we need to get that too, Bill. We're partners too. We kind of hang out a lot and everything. And so you guys remind me, I've had my best friend for 30 years and we don't do a business together, but it's just kind of cool how you meet. And just, even though it's been 30 years, there's no one else that I've connected with like her, which it sounds like you guys. So I just wanted to hear the great story. So I think that's awesome. And look at what this turned into better for you guys being friends and having met. And I got a quick question. So I kind of like the RV story, and I'm thinking about those are things that you can do when you're really young. So it's almost like a good reminder to say, do these things while you're young. A lot of people are very hesitant to step out of corporate America to try to do crazy stuff or whatever, but might as well do it while you're young. You don't want to be doing it when you're 70. So at your age, that was something really cool and fun to do. Not so much at 70.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we can really get trapped into thinking that any decision we make is going to be a final decision, that there's no more plot twists we can throw, that this is going to be then our path. And I think allowing ourselves to question some of these larger expenses and lifestyles that we have, to say, what if I tried something different, but not for forever? What if I tried to have just one vehicle for our household for 6 months or a year? What if we tried to declutter and put our things just in the garage? We can go get them if we want them back, but let me see what would happen if I didn't have as much stuff. What would happen if I downsized? What would happen if I chose to rent instead of owning? None of these things need to be permanent, but they can help us think creatively and problem solve and find new pathways, learn more about ourselves, and maybe even learn to manage our resource of money even better.
Yeah, you really got me hooked, because I've been wanting to sell my house and I've been thinking about going nomadic for a year. And I keep telling myself it's not forever. This is not how it's always going to be, but I want to enjoy this. I want to try it out. So man, you are dropping a lot of nuggets that's going to help convince me to do that.
Well, to me, it sounds scary, and it doesn't sound like something I would have done. I lived in Europe for a couple of years in my 20s, and I experimented too, and I lived a student life on a very meager budget, but it wasn't anything like what you guys were trying to do. And Jen has a story too. We need to hear hers, because we talk about the extremes of extreme spender, extreme saver, and you went to be an extreme saver and lived what sounds like a very frugal life to an extreme in order to pay off your debt. What was that like? And did it have any fallout for you?
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, you and me both, Bill, I couldn't live in the RV. I couldn't go camping. I have to have a king size bed. That's what I need.
Well, here you go. I ain't sleeping on the ground anymore.
No. So yeah, we paid off our debt quickly and thankfully had lower rent. So we didn't have to get creative in that way. But I guess my husband did get creative in how he found the duplex that we lived in during that time, because he wasn't looking in the traditional places for rentals. He was out on his bike, biking around in neighborhoods to find like a place that was just privately owned by someone who would offer lower rent. So we did get creative, and that's kind of how we lived our life for 2 years, is just how can I spend as little as possible? And honestly, I love spending money and I love doing things. And so it was really miserable for me. I thought I was frugal because I was buying the generic brands at the grocery store. And in reality, I loved spending money. I just bought a lot of generic brand stuff, right? So doing this and entering into this extreme, it kind of forced me to have an identity shift to where over the course of 2 years, we were paying off debt, and it was much easier to do with someone living with you who had the same motivation and same incentive is something I would not have been able to do on my own, at least for me. And my identity shifted, and instead of finding joy in buying stuff, which wasn't healthy, I then found my joy in saving and being really financially smart. So when we were done paying off our debt, like near about 18 months in, we bought a house. So I didn't have that to like save for next. So I just skipped right to like saving for retirement. We were putting at least 40% of our income towards IRA and 401k and HSA, and we were just going hard. And it kind of, now I describe it as a debt payoff hangover. And so instead of detoxing and figuring out why I was finding my identity in the financial stuff and why I was finding identity in like my accomplishments in general, I just dove headfirst into doing something else of the same magnitude. So I was like kind of hair of the dog, just keep going just with something else. And I could have kept going like that until in 2019, I was laid off from my job 7 or 8 weeks before I had my first child. So I lost my income. I couldn't go find new income because I was having a baby. And so that's when I had to stop and really consider, why was I at first spending money and finding my identity and doing all these things and buying all these things? And now, why am I finding it in how much I can save and how little I can spend? And we had already been a year into the podcast at that point. So what had started was with Frugal Friends was to help people save as much money as possible, then pivoted on this as we started this journey to figuring out, okay, I have to spend money and I am unable to out earn this. So how do I spend money without going broke?
Okay, well, that's a great segue into, you talk about spending is what we do, not who we are. It's not an identity. Can you each unpack that for us, Jill? Maybe you want to start?
Yeah, I think we're often taught that we're either spenders or we're savers. And the reality is we all spend and we all should be saving, but we're not often taught the skill of spending. We are told to only spend on basic necessities. Don't spend beyond that. If you do spend, it's not wise, and save as much as you possibly can. And we say spending's necessary. We can spend. We've got a lot of needs to spend on that aren't just basic needs, right? Because food, clothing, shelter, yeah, but what if I want my clothing to look good? What if I want my shelter to be aesthetically pleasing? What if I want my food to be tasty? And so we can kind of see how there's this murky line even between needs and wants. And we've also kind of framed our understanding of our needs with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So many of us are probably familiar with that triangle. It was coined by Abraham Maslow, an American psychologist, who identified these kind of hierarchy of needs, where at the bottom, it is some of those basic needs, the food, clothing, shelter, safety, stability needs. And of course, we spend on those things. We need to spend to keep a roof over our head and for transportation and to nourish our bodies. And beyond that, there's some of these higher needs. As you go up the triangle, you've got love and belonging needs, self-esteem needs, self-actualization needs. And that tippy top one of self-actualization is actually referring to our ability to exercise creativity, ingenuity, engage in things that we find meaningful and life-giving, even spontaneity, being able to experience things that are spontaneous and we just get to decide and be a little bit flexible, all are included as our needs. And this was a really helpful thing for both Jen and I to realize this is kind of the key and an indicator of where a lot of our spending happens. We, especially in the Western world, are so conditioned and socialized to spend, to solve our problems, to meet our needs. Even if spending isn't necessary, it's what we do. And so we're accustomed to doing that. And often, even subconsciously, we will spend to achieve love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization. We start to see this in our impulse spending, in our transaction inventory, which helped us to even kind of understand, why are we spending the way that we're spending? Not that it's bad or wrong, but in what ways could we look at this and make some shifts and meet our needs, maybe in even more congruent ways? Because sometimes when we spend to meet the needs, spend to solve a problem, there could have been a better way that actually would hit the nail on the head a bit more with the need if we had given ourselves space to kind of explore that.
Wow, that was something. You really unpacked it well. You can hear about the psychology that you put behind the math, because you guys talk about the math ain't mathin' and you have to show your work. I mean, there you're showing the work. What lies behind the veil of spending? Jen, what are your thoughts on this? Spending is what we do, not who we are.
Well, it comes from the Disney Channel original movie Brink, the classic that all millennials should know. And it's really saying, like, spending is what we do, not who we are, right? So we can spend to get the things that we love. We need to earn money to get a lot of the things that money can't buy. So money is important. Money is foundational, but it's not the goal. And so when we take the focus off of the things that we want to buy, which I believe in budgeting is a lot of our issue. We're budgeting budgeting for things, and that doesn't give us incentive to stick to the budget. When we budget and in our minds, we are pursuing these core values on this hierarchy of needs, and we're pursuing those things, then we have much more incentive to make the money fall in line.
Okay, that is true. Jackie, you have any thoughts on this too? And take us down the path, maybe leading towards the book. But before we do that, one of the things that I really loved about the philosophy that you guys espouse is something you refer to as the Shuhari method. And I love this. Well, you take us through what that is, because this is what we need to do to break down the culturalization or the indoctrination of hyper-consumerism that we live in, right?
Yeah. So Shuhari is a philosophy in martial arts that is essentially mastering a skill or mastering the practice. And it's broken up into 3 parts. Shu is you're just starting out. You're a super beginner. And so you follow a teacher 100% and you don't deviate from them. Ha is once you've gotten a bit of a foundation and you're starting to take in the wisdom of other teachers and kind of starting to customize. And then Ri is mastering. And it doesn't mean you've perfected. It means that you have gotten enough knowledge and skill and practice to where when things come up and your lifestyle doesn't accommodate the answers of the experts, that you can choose what to do for yourself and you can be confident in your choice. And so this is what we do. So for them, it's martial arts. For us, it's personal finance. It's good to get information from one person, but we need to eventually start to listen to other perspectives. And in the end, we need to do what's right for us in any spending decision.
What's interesting is, do you think we do it a little bit ass backwards? Because in personal finance, people talk about the investing piece, the math piece. And in reality, as kids, we have to learn to spend first, then save, then invest. And the skills of spending are really loosey-goosey. For me, I didn't really know how my parents spent. They didn't talk to me about spending. I wasn't trained in the Shuhari method of spending. And that's what you guys are trying to do. And frugal isn't a bad word. It's more about, and budget isn't a bad word. It's a spending plan. And frugal is more conscious spending, as you say, value-based spending. And why don't we learn to spend first and properly?
We love to start with a budget. And it is where most personal finance advice is going to begin, is with the math. That's usually the first thing that's going to pop up on a Google search of what to do. How do I get my spending under control? It's going to be create a budget. But we view budgets, or interchangeably we call them spending plans, as just that, the plan, the strategy. But we first need the skill set to be able to support our implementation of the plan. So it's why we talk about understanding ourselves, our own spending habits, our values and needs before making the plan. It doesn't need to take us ages. We're not saying wait to have a budget for 3 months, but to start with exploring where we've come from, to understand where we currently are, to be able to know where we want to go. And one of the first steps that we encourage people to begin with in that, to even understand what are my values, where have I come from, what am I spending on, who am I, is to do a 90-day transaction inventory. And that includes, as it sounds, looking back at all of our spending and purchases over the last 90 days. This includes grabbing our credit card statements, our bank statements, either printing it out or getting it all into a spreadsheet. We really do like putting it into a digital spreadsheet because that allows us some flexibility in the ways that we can observe and look at some of our spending behaviors, how we orient the spreadsheet, whether it's by date or location. We can alphabetize it. We can order it by amount and really be able to kind of observe, how am I spending? And so when we have all of our transactions gathered, we can ask ourselves some of these non-judgmental questions where we're looking at some of the cues that lead us to spending. We want to include our fixed expenses because we believe that everything we spend on can be questioned, but it's especially when it comes to our discretionary spending that we can look at location, time of day, emotion, people that we were with that maybe prompted the type of spending that we're doing, and identify, what do I feel good about here? What feels very very values aligned in my spending? What spending transactions do I not even remember or didn't actually get me closer to what I was trying to accomplish? And so we're asking these what, where, and how questions, avoiding the why question, because we believe that why, when we're asking it of ourselves or maybe our partner, if we're managing finances together, can put us on the defense. It can elicit automatic fight mode, justification of our actions of why did you spend so much here at this store to what was it about this purchase that made you want to spend here? What were you trying to achieve? What need were you trying to meet? We can kind of see how the latter makes us dig deeper, get more curious. I wonder about that versus, what do you mean? I needed those things. And then we just try and justify it. So asking ourselves these non-judgmental questions can really help us to understand more about our habits, the cues, our impulse spending, what we enjoy, what we don't enjoy, to be able to help inform the plan that we eventually make.
Well, I love all of that. I'm thinking about you guys' audience. You mainly serve millennials, but everything that you're saying, it's for late starters. And I noticed that even in our group, our listeners, many of them are in their late 20s and 30s. And a 50-year-old might say, oh, you're not getting late start. You have plenty of time. But it's how you feel. And you kind of step through the same thing. All the things you described, I'm thinking about our audience, Bill, where they're feeling this way. Even the Shuhari method, the same thing. I don't know if I pronounced that right. But I feel like the early days of personal finance were very rigid. They were mostly about the math and the numbers. And the song that you guys are singing is more about your emotions, your feelings. And in my opinion, nothing happens until your mind is right, until you're feeling that way. And that's what you guys put in the book that I really appreciate.
Yeah, eventually we get to the math. That is important. There is a reality and a context here, but we're not going to be able to operate well within it if we are not understanding the thoughts and emotions that are leading to our behaviors, our routines, and our habits. And so again, we get to the math, we make a spending plan, but we also have to understand how we operate and the fact that we are whole people, and our relationships and our emotions and whether or not we've had a stressful day is going to bear weight on our spending decisions. And that's not entirely wrong. We can plan for that, but we've got to know it if we're going to be able to respond intentionally with eyes wide open.
Yeah, I really feel like I wrote my parts of the book for me like 10, 15 years ago, who was making budget after budget after budget and just could not stick with it. And the guilt every month led to this cycle of shame that made me feel like I'm just not capable of doing it. And what was happening was that I was making a really good plan, but I had not harnessed the skills to create the plan. Like, you can make a fitness plan at the gym to get a six pack, but if you don't have the proper technique to squat, like you don't know which exercises get you abs, like you're not going to know how to complete that plan. And it was the same with the budget. Like, I didn't know how to spend in alignment with my values. So I just didn't spend in alignment with the budget because it also wasn't in alignment with my values.
I mean, what you guys talk about in one of the sections of your book is buy what you love. And then you have to ask yourself first, what do you really love? And people think maybe first about things, but you talk about the 4 Fs. And I want you guys to address that, because these are the things that are sort of the higher values, higher in the Maslow's pyramid, as opposed to the things that we naturally gravitate towards, because you can love anything, but you can't love everything. And that's kind of an analogy to Paula Pant, where you can afford anything, but not everything. Tell us about the 4 Fs.
Yeah, so they're derived from Maslow's hierarchy of need. So we do think when we are first thinking about what do you value spending on, we jump straight to things. But studies show if you ask people what makes them happiest in life, they don't say things. So where's the disconnect? The disconnect is that usually when we're buying things, we're trying to actually meet needs, these higher needs on the hierarchy. And so we just have to figure out what needs is we're trying to meet. So a lot of the times we discount these higher needs. We don't really think we're trying to meet them because they're not tangible. And so going back to the hierarchy, these higher needs start with belonging and connection, and then go to self-esteem, and then go to self-actualization. self-actualization. So for me, like I felt I was buying a lot of lattes. And so of all the lattes I was buying, not all of them I remembered when I looked back at my transaction inventory, but some of them I did. The ones that I ended up remembering were the times I got coffee with friends, and then the times like I went to this really fancy coffee shop and got the really fancy latte, and I just felt like so cool. So those were the two that I really liked. And on the surface, like, yes, we know the first one with friends, I'm really trying to meet the friends need, right? I'm trying to get connection. And if that's what I'm trying to get, there are a lot of other ways I can get it without spending money. But what about that really fancy latte that made me feel really fancy? That's actually a combination. It could be either, but for me, it was self-actualization. Sometimes it's, especially in our social media age, a esteem need where we're posting pictures of these lattes to get respect, to gain confidence from other people's respect. For me, I loved the creativity that came with the latte. It was kind of like art to me, like art that I can't do, but like that was done by someone else. Like I'm not buying pieces of art, I'm buying lattes. So that was kind of what it was for me. Self-actualization is a lot of having the space to be creative or spontaneous, which is a lot of what our impulse spending comes from, is our desire to be spontaneous, but we don't honor that. But it doesn't mean it goes away. It just comes out in other places. So there's a lot of options. And so to boil it down for a starter guide, we coined this term, the 4 Fs, because we're the frugal friends and we love F words. Family, friends, faith, and fulfilling work. These are the 4 things that I think 80% of the time we're trying to get at. And they meet pretty much every single one of those higher needs: connection, esteem, and self-actualization. You can get at all 3 of them in all 4 of these core values. So if you're feeling kind of confused on where to start figuring out, okay, how do I align my spending with my values? If you just run it through the filter of the 4 Fs, it's a really good place to start to figure out why you're making the purchases you are making.
Well, I like that. I mean, it really resonates with me. And it sort of speaks against the treat culture. And I'm a latte person too. And I don't always think about what need I'm trying to fulfill by, instead of making my matcha green tea latte at home, which I can perfectly do, I like going out, getting my latte, taking the dogs, and going for a walk with my latte. So that's what I associate a latte with. But I don't always know. And sometimes I'm just like coming back from work and I'm like, I need a treat. What do you guys think about the treat culture?
We think we can do ourselves a disservice by the I deserve and this little treat. I do think that we all deserve a treat and we all want these little luxuries and simple pleasures throughout the day. But I think sometimes we can get so wrapped up in these lower level things that we're not paying attention to our higher needs. What we actually deserve is fulfilling time with family and friends, opportunities to engage in meaningful faith and spirituality practices, to be able to find in engaging and fulfilling work, whether that be within our careers or our hobbies or just what we're able to do in our free time or volunteerism. And so not to say that we can't enjoy a nice little beverage at the end of the day, but also where are we allowing ourselves to dream and problem solve and get creative about ways to meet these 4 Fs or the higher needs on the hierarchy, and then go from there with the way that we choose to kind of treat ourselves. I personally love simple pleasures. I love to incorporate simple pleasures into my day, but I've also realized they don't all have to cost me money. There are ways that my life can feel luxurious and life-giving and joy-filled without me pulling out my credit card. And it also is allowing me to look at, and in what ways can some of these simple pleasures or the ways that I am orienting and utilizing all of my resources, not just my finances, but my time and my mental relations, my mental energy, my emotions, my relationships, to be able to experience and feel fulfilled in some of these values and higher needs. And so I think being able to aim higher is really the encouragement here of, before we think about bottom of the barrel, am I allowed to get the coffee today? How am I engaging in meaningful ways with these 4 Fs? And how can I aim at that on a daily basis? And then if I want the latte, go for it.
Yeah, Yeah. So I wonder, what if you can't afford what you love? Because, we're in that society where, especially I think about the younger Jackie, I wanted the fancy car. Back then, the nice car was a Fiero. It was all sporty and stuff. But what's the right thing to do if you can't afford what you love?
Yeah. So cars are a thing that I see meeting an esteem need, right? Like I see this a lot. Like when I have worked hard and I think I deserve a nice car because of how hard I work. And that'll make me feel better about myself because I have a nice car. And I know other people will look at me better because they'll see I'm not driving a junker. So really, we're looking at these needs. We don't see them, right? We just see like, oh, like they're driving a nice car. I'm seeing ads for the nice car. I deserve a nice car. And it's in that selling ourselves short piece. Like, yes, you do deserve a nice car, but like, have you considered what you ultimately deserve? Like, do you ultimately deserve to retire at a good age, to be able to create work flexibility so that you have more time with family and friends, to increase your income so you have more money to give or invest in the places you're passionate about, to really create a life that you are obsessed with? Like, that is truly what I believe people want from their lives. It's what I want from my life. So when I'm taking that stuff into consideration, then I can prioritize better the things that I want. And I want far fewer things because of that. But there does come time where like there's a difference between being hungry and not knowing where your next meal is coming from. Sometimes you're in that space where you can't think about your higher needs as much because we're much more worried about meeting basic needs. But we still don't want to deprive ourselves. So how do we prioritize when we're in that season? Well, first, it's in honoring our season, knowing that we may not be able to make as much financial headway as other people are, or as we once were, or that we will be making in the future. So honoring the season that you're in and actively trying to improve, and then giving yourself permission to incorporate some values that you can afford. Like so much of these on the hierarchy of needs can be met without spending money. So let's first figure out how I can fill my cup as much as possible for free. And then we go with any discretionary funds for low cost. And then right now we may not be in a season where we can splurge in meeting our needs. It doesn't mean we'll never be in that season, but we're much more motivated to keep going forward when we're focusing on the right things and filling our cups in the right places versus trying to have a things first approach.
I think we can also even identify with a purchase that we feel we can't afford without going into debt to purchase it. What is the need I'm trying to meet? And in what ways can I still meet that need without spending the money? So we're not talking about deprivation, but finding alternatives. And so if it is esteem or respect from others, in what ways can I experience increased esteem, confidence in myself, or gain or earn the respect of others? And that could be doing the thing that you're good at, or engaging in a new hobby, or building friendships with a community that also is engaged in the same thing that you would consider yourself good or expert at. Because ultimately, the car isn't ever going to actually do the things that we think it's going to do. It doesn't mean that we won't enjoy riding in a beautiful smelling brand new car, but in reality, it's not actually going to increase our esteem needs. We can't buy our way towards self-esteem. We can't buy our way towards respect, but engaging in connection and finding where the communities in which we experience belonging and reciprocity, absolutely, we will meet that need head on.
Yeah, I love the way you guys frame that. And being a part of like co-hosting the podcast with Bill, that gives me some esteem that makes me feel good. And maybe that helps me focus less on something physical or something that I might not like. So I get that. I really love the way that you guys frame that. And I don't know that that ever goes away. So I'm a little bit older than you guys. And I think if I used that type of thinking when I was younger, it would have changed a lot. But now I can incorporate that, and you just sort of put a nice bow around it. So thank you for that. And anyone that reads your book, I think that's one thing that's going to stick with them.
And actually, speaking of the greater good and the bigger needs, you guys talk about value-based spending as a vote. And there's a greater good to frugality and the environmental impact of frugality. Can you guys give us each, as we close the show, your view on how the smaller concept of frugality has a much bigger impact? One person's frugality has a much bigger impact in our world?
Yeah. So money is power, and you can't deny that. And so with every dollar that leaves your bank account, you are giving your power to other people, which is not a bad thing, but it does beg us to be conscious of where that power is funneling. Are we empowering the people in our community? Are we empowering people who are oppressing others for their own gain, or who are negligent with the environment for their own gain? And we can never be perfect. It keeps a lot of people from considering where their money is going and the power that they're giving, because we can't be perfect. It's just not going to happen. But you can be conscious of it and make as many right decisions as is feasible for you in your season. So like, I'm not going to be buying my groceries at a farmer's market because, I mean, frankly, it's not just an affordability piece. It's like, I have 2 young children. I can't get down there. And I just took my kids to the grocery store on Sunday, like as a one-time thing. And it was miserable. It was the worst. Like tantrums, fighting over things they wanted, knocking. My 2-year-old is a cat, and he just like puts his arm out and just knocks things off shelves just to be feral. So like, I can't do that. I have to shop on Walmart.com and buy my groceries and pick them up at Walmart. But there are other decisions I can make. Like, I can choose, if I eat out less so that I can choose to only eat out at locally owned restaurants. I do what I can in my season to try and vote with my dollar.
I'll take a little bit different of an approach and perspective because we define frugality as being good stewards of all of our resources. I believe that this includes social capital and the resource that we have of community and relationships. And so for me, the benefit and life-altering piece of frugality has been the ways in which I have viewed and gained increased value for the relationships that I have around me. Of course, Jen and our Frugal Friends community, but also in just the space that I live in. It has caused me to just be more aware of my neighbors. We share tools, we share food, we share ideas and recipes. Just recently, I had a neighbor come over and we did a swap where I taught her how to make sourdough bread, and she gave me this homemade hand lotion that she had made from all natural ingredients. And we learned things about one another, and we shared these ideas, and we engaged in activities that cost us very little, next to nothing, and yet walked away with skill sets and learning and growth and friendship and reciprocity and a knowledge that I can ask you for help and vice versa. And we're here for one another. And that is something that is priceless. I can't say how much money that has saved me or will save me in the future to not have to buy my way out of these problems. And I think we mentioned at the top of the episode just about the hurricanes that we just went through in St. Petersburg, Florida, and the back-to-back devastation that was experienced. And I think that really brought to the surface the reality that it doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank account. What really mattered was the relationships that you have with one another, the neighbors that came out to support one another, exchange tools, share labor, feed one another. It didn't matter if you had all the money in the world if you couldn't get to the supermarket and no one was selling food. What mattered was the community and the ways in which we supported one another. So I think we don't always have this at the forefront of our minds, but it is something that we can pursue, and we can experience wealth in a lot more variety of ways than just financially when we are able to recognize all of the resources available to us.
Wow, that is a great way to, I think, close out the show. Wealth is not just financial resources. Wealth is in the community that you serve, that you're a part of, and frugality can be fun. I hope we've answered Amber's question, or at least in part. And if we haven't answered Amber's question today, go read the book. It answers these questions about how frugality can be fun and how value-based spending impacts your world and the world around you. Jackie, do you have any closing thoughts today?
Yeah, it's just that I love these ladies. I'm so glad I added you to my podcast list. I love the book. Thank you for giving us an early copy. And we do need more financial educators that are careful enough to include the psychological and the emotional stuff. So I thank you guys for being a part of that. For the longest, I thought I was trying to do this alone. And so I have a lot of hope. So tell us where people can find you. The book came out, was it January 7th?
Yes, January 7th.
Okay, woohoo, we're partying that date.
Yes. Yeah, it is available wherever books are sold. And we would love for you to support your local bookstore. If they don't have it locally, bookshop.org, you can get it and support your local bookstore. And yeah, there are a lot of voices coming behind us that have this same ideology. And I really believe this is one of the first books that's done it. And the success of this book will tell other publishers if they should accept this ideology from other authors. So we just hope, even if you think you don't need it, to buy a copy for a friend and just support the spreading of this message, so it sets a precedent for the voices coming behind us that say it in a little bit of a different way to also find success in books, podcasts, video, whatever their platforms are.
So many books are about the numbers.
Yeah, there's no shortage of them.
How to do the numbers, but this is the why behind the numbers. And like I said, I really enjoyed reading the book. I encourage all of you to get your copy. It dropped a few days ago. I think this drops on January 12th. The book is now available everywhere as of January 7th, as is Doc G's book, The Purpose Code. So buy both of these for Valentine's Day for your partner.
There is such a good alignment between the two books, too. They are very complementary.
Yeah, and so you guys' podcast, tell us the name of the podcast and how often you publish, because I'm a podcast listener, so I follow your podcast and I love getting like great stuff every week.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah. So Frugal Friends podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, we put out new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.
All right. Well, it's been a joy to have you on the show. I feel like I'm a frugal friend now, too. And guess what? You can now put that you have been on Catching Up to FI on your website. You have come of age.
Yes, finally.
Bill, you're surrounded around all the J's too. You've got Jackie, Jill, and Jen. So,
oh my gosh, power in numbers.
Power, that's right.
And I want you to know that I left you guys a voice message. You asked people to leave a voice message about your latest bill. I left you one yesterday, so.
I was going to ask you to do it once we stopped recording.
Yes.
It's been done.
Yes.
Go to your email and you'll find it. And guys, our guests can do the same thing. They can go to our contact page and leave us a SpeakPipe voicemail. We'd love to put your voice on the show. All right, guys, we could talk forever, and we'll have you back to continue the conversation. Thanks again, everybody, for listening on Catching Up to FI. We'll see you next week.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brazard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to FI. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to FI. Cheers.